The courtroom doors did not open. They shattered, not from force exactly, from the weight of what walked through them. Three men in leather and iron moving with the certainty of people who had already decided how this ended before they arrived. Chains rattled against the polished marble floor. Boots struck the tile in a rhythm that silenced every whispered conversation in the gallery before the men had taken 10 steps. Behind them, 22 more filled the hallway, a wall of chrome and consequence that the bailiffs looked at and, after a moment's calculation, chose not to challenge. At the center of it all, behind the defense table, sat a woman in an orange prison jumpsuit. 70 years old, hands cuffed in her lap, head bowed just slightly, the way a person bows not from defeat, but from the accumulated weight of carrying something heavy for a very long time. Her name was Dorothy Reeves. If you want to understand why those men came through that door the way they did, why 25 motorcycles sat idling in the courthouse parking lot like a cavalry waiting for its signal, you have to go back. You have to understand what she gave them before any of them were old enough to know what giving meant. You have to start at the beginning. Dorothy woke at 4 o'clock every morning, not because an alarm told her to, because her body had been doing it for 34 years and had simply forgotten how to stop. She moved through the dark of her house on Birch Street the way she moved through everything quietly without ceremony, with a purpose that did not require an audience. The floorboards knew which ones to avoid. The kitchen recognized her by the sound of her slippers on the linoleum. Before she made coffee, before she turned on a single light, she stopped in front of the dresser in the hallway. 2 photographs. The first one, a boy 3 years old, gap-toothed, and grinning with the kind of joy that has not yet learned what the world costs. His name was Daniel. He had her eyes, that specific shade that looked brown in some lights and almost black in others. He had her stubbornness too. Her mother had said so on one of the rare occasions her mother said something worth remembering. Daniel had been gone for 40 years. The second photograph, 3 boys in mismatched clothes standing in front of a rusted Ford truck that had no business being on a public road. She had ironed their shirts at 5 that morning because wrinkles bothered her, because it was the one thing she could give them that cost nothing but time and attention, and she had always had both. They were squinting into the sun. Blake had his arm around Merritt's shoulder in that casual way teenage boys use to pretend they are not being affectionate. Cassidy stood half a step behind the way he always stood, present but slightly apart, watching the world with eyes that had seen too much and learned to keep most of it to themselves. Dorothy touched the edge of Daniel's photograph. Just the edge. Just for a moment. She said quietly into the dark of the hallway, "I'm still here." Then she walked into the kitchen. She filled the kettle, set it on the burner. Opened the drawer beside the stove, not the junk drawer, but the one beside it, the one she kept for things she had not decided how to explain yet. The pill bottle was in the back. She took it out without looking at it directly, the way you handle something you have made your peace with but not fully accepted. Shook one tablet into her palm, swallowed it with water from the tap, put the bottle back, closed the drawer. She had known about her heart for 3 months. A tightening in the chest. At first she had mistaken it for grief, which she was no stranger to. Then the shortness of breath on the walk from her car to the grocery store, which she had attributed to getting older, which she was also no stranger to. Dr. Paulson had used the phrase mild coronary artery disease in the same measured tone he used for everything, as though the weight of words could be moderated by the voice that carried them. Stress, he had said, avoid it. She had not told the boys. They had enough to carry. They had always had enough to carry, and they had always carried it without complaint, because she had raised them to, because that was the only inheritance she'd had to give them. Not money, not connections, not a name that opened doors. Just the knowledge that hard things could be survived if you kept showing up for them. She was not about to burden them with the knowledge that showing up was getting harder. The kettle whistled. She poured her coffee, sat down at the kitchen table, looked at the 3 chairs. They did not match. They had never matched. The oak one with the ladder back she had found at a garage sale the summer Blake turned 2. The metal folding chair she had brought home from the school cafeteria when they replaced the furniture, and the principal said she could take what she wanted. The black painted stool that Cassidy had customized with hand-drawn flames when he was 15, during the phase when he communicated almost exclusively through art and silence. 3 chairs for 3 boys who were grown now and gone, and still somehow present in every corner of this kitchen. She pulled the letter from the stack of mail she had left on the table the night before. She had known what it was when it arrived. The return address was the Millbrook Unified School District, and there was only one reason the district sent certified mail to a retired janitor. She read it once, then again, then a third time, because the third time was when the words stopped being words and started being the thing they actually were. Civil complaint, misappropriation of district resources, the dollar amount $47,000. Her name printed in capital letters at the top of every page over and over, like something being hammered into stone. She set the papers down, looked at her hands. They were not the hands of a thief. She knew that with the same certainty. She knew the distance between the furnace room and the second-floor girls' bathroom, the exact angle at which the gymnasium windows had to be propped to get a cross breeze in July, the specific sound the boiler made in February when it was about to give out and needed coaxing. Her knuckles were enlarged from 34 years of gripping mops and wrenches. Her left thumbnail had a permanent shadow of grease beneath it that no amount of scrubbing had ever fully removed. The sleeve of her robe bore a repaired tear she had stitched herself 3 separate times because it was a good robe and fabric did not deserve to be thrown away just because it was worn. These hands had unclogged every toilet in Millbrook Elementary, had patched the gymnasium roof with material she bought herself because the work order had been sitting on someone's desk for 3 months and the rain was not going to wait for paperwork, had changed every burned-out bulb on the 3rd floor because the maintenance budget would not stretch to an electrician and the children deserved to be able to see. Now someone was saying these hands had stolen. She picked up the phone. Blake answered on the second ring. Evie, he was the only one who called her that, a childhood shortening of her name that had never fully resolved into something pronounceable and had eventually become its own word, a word that meant only her. Hey, Blake. She kept her voice level. She had learned over decades of delivering difficult news to small children in the principal's office that the voice was the first thing that had to be managed. You busy? I'm mid-job. What's wrong? Nothing's wrong. She looked at the papers. The district sent some paperwork over. It's probably nothing. What kind of paperwork? A complaint. She chose the word carefully. They're saying I took some things from the school. The line went quiet in a way that had weight to it. Took things, Blake said slowly. Supplies, equipment, they've got a long list. How much are they claiming? She hesitated. 47,000. The silence that followed was different from the first one. The first had been processing. This one was something being decided. Don't talk to anyone, Blake said. His voice had shifted, the warmth still present, but underneath it something harder. Something that had been formed over years of leading men who needed to know their leader understood what to do. Don't sign anything. Don't answer calls from the district. Blake, it's just I'm coming. And I'm bringing the brothers. You don't have to. The line clicked. She set the phone down, looked at the letter, looked at the hallway where Daniel's photograph sat on the dresser, just visible through the doorway. She had not felt afraid exactly when she read the complaint. She had felt something older than fear, a kind of tired recognition, the sensation of being a person who had spent a lifetime doing the right thing and discovered more than once that the right thing offered no guarantees. She had felt it before. She knew how to hold it. But something in Blake's voice, that shift, that settling into certainty, loosened something in her chest that she had not known was tight. She was not alone. 20 minutes later, she heard the engines. Not one, not two. The deep, layered rumble of Harley-Davidsons in formation rolling through the quiet of Birch Street like a change in weather. She walked to the front window and pulled back the curtain. They came around the corner in 2 columns, 5, then 10, then 15, then more, parking along the curb in a precision that would have been almost military if the men doing it hadn't been wearing leather and chains and patches that most people in Millbrook had spent years giving a wide berth to. Blake swung off his bike first. He pulled off his helmet and looked at the house the way he always looked at it, like a man checking on something he was responsible for protecting. His vest had the Iron Ridge MC patch across the back and a single word beneath it, President. Merritt came next. Leaner, same height. A welding jacket layered over his vest sleeves pushed to the elbows. Scars on his forearms from years of working metal and the emergency sites where he volunteered on weekends. He moved with the quiet efficiency of someone trained to assess situations fast and act faster. Cassidy was last, the youngest. 22 built solid tattoos covering both arms in designs he had drawn himself, intricate and deliberate, every line considered. His sketchbook was tucked into his back pocket, as always, as though he might at any moment need to make sense of the world through the only language that had ever fully worked for him. Behind them, 22 more men dismounted, some with long hair, some with shaved heads, just ranging from early 30s to late 50s, all wearing the same patch. Iron Ridge MC Dorothy opened the door before any of them reached the porch. Blake climbed in the steps and stopped in front of her. The look on his face was one she recognized. It was the look he'd worn at 8 years old when he first understood that the world was not always fair and had decided with a child's absolute conviction that unfairness was something to be fought rather than accepted. "You should have called me first," he said. "I didn't want to worry you." Too late. He stepped inside. Merritt and Cassidy followed. The rest of the club stayed on the street leaning against their bikes, arms folded, watching the house with the patient attentiveness of men who had learned that the most important thing you could do for someone was simply remain present. Dorothy closed the door. The kitchen felt different with all three of them in it. It always did. They took up space in a way that was not just physical. Their presence changed the quality of the room. Not in a threatening way, in the way of something returning to where it belonged. Blake sat down and started reading the lawsuit page by page, slow and methodical. Merritt opened the hallway closet and started pulling out the spiral notebooks. Cassidy photographed every page of the lawsuit documents with his phone systematic and silent. Evie Blake said without looking up, "These purchase orders have specific dates, order numbers, dollar amounts." He set one paper down. "They're saying you ordered supplies that never made it to the school." "Everything I ordered went into that building," she said. "Every bolt, every can of paint." Merritt looked up from the notebooks. His expression had changed. "You kept records. I wrote down every repair I made, every supply I ordered, every light bulb I changed. How many notebooks? 34 years worth." Blake set the lawsuit down and looked at her directly. "Who is Doyle Hargrove?" "New superintendent. Showed up about 18 months ago." She paused. "The one who's been cutting the maintenance budget. What do you know about him? Wears pressed shirts. Talks smooth. Cut the budget his first month. The building's been falling apart since." She looked at her hands. "I mentioned to the principal that the supply numbers weren't adding up. 2 weeks later, this showed up." Blake was quiet for a while. Then, "Tell me about the school. All of it, from the beginning." She looked at the clock. Barely 7 in the morning. Outside, 22 men were standing guard on her street. She started at the beginning. The parking lot was empty at 4:30 in the morning, 34 years ago. Dorothy pulled in and cut the engine on her old Ford, the one with the rusted bed and a heater that worked on the driver's side only. She was 36 years old. Daniel had been gone for 6 years. Her husband had left 4 years before that. No note, just a packed bag and an absence that had felt at first like a held breath and eventually like weather. She had the job because she needed it and because the principal at the time, a woman named Hauser, who had a gift for seeing people clearly, had looked at Dorothy's application and seen not a grieving widow with a gap in her employment history, but someone who would show up. She was right. Dorothy let herself in through the side entrance, walked the main hallway with her flashlight, checked the furnace room first. Always the furnace room, then the second floor bathrooms, then the gymnasium. A pipe had been leaking behind the bleachers, and she wanted to check the patch job from Friday. She pushed open the gym doors. Something was crying. Not a cat, not the wind through the ventilation ducts. A baby. The sound bounced off the hardwood and the cinder block walls and came back from every direction at once. She swept the flashlight beam across the floor and found it a cardboard box brown about the size of a case of copy paper. Inside, a blanket with yellow ducks on it, faded from washing. And in the blanket, a baby. Tiny, red-faced, screaming with the full commitment of a creature that has nothing but its voice and is using all of it. Dorothy knelt down. Her knees cracked against the hardwood. She pointed the flashlight at the blanket and found a piece of lined paper safety pinned to the edge. Handwritten. 5 words. "Please take care of him." No name, no explanation. Just a request from someone who was already gone. She looked at the baby for a long moment. He could not have been more than a few days old. His fists were clenched, his eyes squeezed shut, every breath a howl. She had not held a baby since Daniel. The last time had been in a hospital room where she was telling him a story about a dog who could fly, and the monitors had started beeping faster, and then they had stopped, and the story had never been finished, and she had never told it to anyone else. She reached into the box and picked him up. He weighed almost nothing. Her hand covered his entire back. His head fit in her palm. He turned his face into her jacket toward warmth, toward the heartbeat, toward whatever signal babies are born already knowing how to find. "My name's Dot," she said. Her voice was steady. She was always steady when it mattered. "I fix things. That's what I do. So let's get you fixed up." She carried him to the front office, called the police. By the time the caseworker arrived, Dorothy was sitting in the custodial closet warmest room in the building, with the baby wrapped in her Carhartt jacket. "We'll find placement," the caseworker said. "Give us a few days. I can take him tonight," Dorothy said. The caseworker looked at her, a 36-year-old janitor in a custodial closet holding a newborn. "Mrs. Reeves, we have procedures." "I know you do. I've got a spare room," she paused. "It was my son's." Something shifted in the caseworker's face. "A few days," she said. "We'll have placement by Thursday." Thursday came and went. The spare room had a crib in it, the one with the mobile of wooden stars she had carved herself years ago. A stuffed bear on the mattress. A stack of picture books on the shelf. She had not opened that door since the funeral. She stood in the doorway for a long time. Then she cleaned the crib, washed the sheets, and laid the baby down. He slept for 2 hours, then he woke up screaming, and he woke. By dawn, she had slept 40 minutes and had formula on her shirt and a crick in her neck from the rocking chair. She stood in the kitchen, making coffee, and realized with a kind of mild surprise that it was the first morning in years she had not woken up dreading the day. She named him Blake, after her grandfather, a mechanic in Virginia who had raised 4 kids on a salary that barely covered rent and had never once complained about it. When she was 10 and being teased for wearing the same shoes every day, he had sat her down and said, "You're enough, Evelyn. Don't let anyone tell you different." She figured if this baby was going to carry anyone's name, it should be his. Full custody came 6 months after the hearing. She walked out of the courthouse carrying Blake in one arm and a folder of legal papers in the other. Merritt's mother was named Lorraine Hayes. She worked double shifts at the town diner 6 days a week, dark circles under her eyes and rough hands from the dish pit, and every morning she walked Merritt to school in clean clothes with his hair combed neat. He was 5 years old, quite small for his age. Every afternoon at 3:15 after the hallways cleared, he appeared at Dorothy's custodial closet. He sat on an overturned bucket by the door and said, "Mrs. Reeves, do you have crackers?" She always had crackers. She had started keeping saltines in the closet after the second time he asked. She handed him a few and he ate them one at a time while working through his homework. "What's 7 plus 8? What do you think it is?" He counted on his fingers. 15. "There you go." This went on for months. She never asked why he didn't go to the after-school program. The answer was visible in the way Lorraine looked when she pulled up in her old sedan at 6 in the evening, still in her diner uniform, smelling like grease and coffee. Lorraine couldn't afford the program. There was nobody else. So every afternoon, Merritt did his homework on a bucket and sometimes fell asleep there, and Dorothy carried him to the front office and waited. "He talks about you at home," Lorraine told her once. "Says you're the smartest woman in the school." "He hasn't met the science teacher yet," Dorothy said. Lorraine smiled, tired but real. The accident was on a Thursday in February. Icy roads, a delivery truck crossed the center line. Lorraine was driving home from the diner. She died before the ambulance arrived. Dorothy heard Merritt start crying through the closed door of the principal's office. Not loud, the quiet kind that has no words yet. She petitioned for custody that same week. The caseworker was young, nervous, overly formal. "Mrs. Reeves, you already have one child in your care. I know. And your income hasn't changed. I know that too. He's been coming to my closet every afternoon for months," she said. "He eats crackers and does his homework and falls asleep on a bucket. His mother just died and nobody came for him." She looked at the caseworker steadily. "I'm not asking you if it's practical. I'm asking you to let me take him home." The caseworker looked at her for a long time. Then he started filling out the paperwork. Merritt moved in and did not talk for the first week. He sat at the table and stared at his plate. Dorothy made scrambled eggs every morning because he had mentioned once that was what his mother used to make. On the 8th morning, she came downstairs and found him at the stove. "What are you doing, making eggs?" He cracked one into the pan without looking at her. "You do them wrong. Mom always added milk." She stood in the doorway and watched a 5-year-old teach her to scramble eggs. They sat at the table together and ate in silence. It was the first full meal he had eaten since Lorraine died. Cassidy came 4 years later. Dorothy was mopping the first floor hallway at 6 in the morning when she heard something from the basement. Not a pipe, not the building settling, something with breath in it. She went down with her flashlight. Behind the old boiler wedged between the wall and a stack of broken folding tables, a boy, 8 years old, wearing a long-sleeved shirt in June. He did not flinch when the flashlight hit him. He looked at her with the specific quality she had learned by then to recognize the look of a child who has stopped expecting anything good and is simply waiting to see what variety of bad this would turn out to be. "My name's Dot," she said. She crouched down, putting herself at his level. "I'm the janitor. Are you hurt?" He shook his head. "Are you hungry?" His eyes moved to the thermos in her hand. "That's coffee, which is probably not your speed. How about I go upstairs and get you something to eat?" He stared at her. "I'll be right back," she said. "I promise." She went upstairs, heated soup on the hot plate in the custodial closet, grabbed a blanket from the lost and found, brought both back down. He was still there. She set the soup beside him, draped the blanket over his shoulders, and sat on the floor a few feet away. Waited. He picked up the soup after a while and drank it slowly. "What's your name?" she asked. No answer. "That's okay. You don't have to tell me." He finished the soup, set the can down, pulled the blanket tighter. Then he closed his eyes. She called the police. They identified him as Cassidy Vaughn, 8 years old, from a foster placement 2 miles from the school. When the officers asked to see his arms, he pulled up his sleeves. Dorothy stepped outside to give him privacy. The look on the officer's face when he came back said everything. 3 days later, the caseworker called. "The emergency placement isn't working. He won't eat. He won't speak. He keeps asking for the janitor." "Bring him here," Dorothy said. He arrived with a garbage bag of clothes and a stuffed rabbit with one ear missing. He sat in the third chair, the black stool, and said nothing. Blake, who was 4 years old and fundamentally unbothered by most things, sat beside him and started coloring. Merritt set a plate of scrambled eggs in front of Cassidy and went back to the counter without a word. For 2 weeks, Cassidy moved through the house without making a sound. Dorothy made meals, washed his clothes, left the hallway light on because she noticed he slept with his door open. She removed the lock from the pantry quietly without mentioning it, so the food was always visible, always accessible, so he would learn in the slowest and most reliable way possible that it would not be taken from him. Then one morning, she was in the kitchen making coffee. Cassidy appeared in the doorway in pajamas 2 sizes too big, holding the stuffed rabbit by its one remaining ear. "Mrs. Reeves." "Morning, Cassidy." He stood there for a long moment. She poured her coffee and waited. "Can I stay with you forever?" She set the mug down, looked at him. He had asked the question with the careful, controlled composure of a child who has been disappointed so many times that hope itself has become a risk to be managed. "Yeah," she said. "You can." She adopted him 4 months later. 3 boys, 3 chairs, 1 paycheck. She sold the truck and rode the bus to work, which meant leaving the house at 4 in the morning. She ate after the boys ate. Some nights that meant she did not eat at all. She patched their clothes instead of buying new ones, cut her own hair with kitchen scissors, never missed a school play, never missed a conference, never missed a doctor's appointment. Nobody told her she was doing something remarkable. She never thought she was. When the neighbor asked how she managed 3 boys alone, she just said, "They're good boys," as though they were doing her the favor, as though she had not built every piece of the stability they stood on with her own 2 hands. Back in the present, back in the kitchen. Blake set the lawsuit down and looked at her across the table. "Tell me everything you know about Doyle Hargrove," he said. Dorothy wrapped her hands around her coffee mug. Hargrove had arrived 18 months ago in spring when the dogwoods along the school entrance were still blooming. He drove up in a vehicle that cost more than Dorothy had made in 3 years and walked into the building with the particular confidence of a man who had already calculated every variable and liked the results. Pressed shirts. The phrase fiscal responsibility used in the same smooth practice tone that people use when they want other people to stop asking questions. He donated to the church. He attended school board meetings and smiled at the right moments and built a reputation in a few months that would have taken an honest person years. His first official act was to cut the maintenance budget by 40%. Dorothy had noticed the effects within weeks. Supply orders came back short. Work orders for repairs went unanswered. The heating system on the third floor began to falter in November. By December, half the classrooms were using space heaters brought from home because the district would not authorize a repair. She had documented all of it in the notebooks. Every entry dated, every supply item listed with its quantity and requisition number, every repair described in plain functional language. In January, she had brought her concerns to the principal, a young woman named Aldridge, who was new to the role and still learning the politics of the district. Dorothy had laid out the numbers plainly. The supplies she was ordering were not arriving in the quantities the purchase orders reflected. The money was going somewhere, but it was not going into the building. Principal Aldridge had listened carefully, taken notes, and promised to look into it. 2 weeks later, Dorothy received the certified letter. He moved fast, Blake said. He knew what he was doing, she said. He did not hesitate. Cassidy looked up from his phone. He looked at me differently after that. Every time he came through the hallway, like he was trying to decide if I was a problem. Are you? Blake asked with a particular expression that meant he already knew the answer. I have a key to every room in that building, Cassidy said. Blake looked at his brothers, then back at Dorothy. Then you're going to need your camera, he said. By 7 in the morning, the front yard of the house on Birch Street had been transformed into something that looked like a field command post. 22 men from Iron Ridge MC had unloaded folding tables from their saddlebags and set them up in 2 rows across the lawn. Laptops open, notebooks spread, phones charging off portable battery packs. Someone had strung work lights between the porch rail and the old oak at the edge of the property, even though there was enough daylight now, because they were men who planned for the hours ahead and not just the ones they were standing in. Blake stood at the center of it. He had the lawsuit in one hand and 3 of Dorothy's notebooks open on the table in front of him. He had not raised his voice once. He did not need to. Listen up. Every head turned. She raised me. She raised Merritt. She raised Cassidy. She did it on $12 an hour, and she never asked a single person for help. Now the district is trying to bury her with a lawsuit. $47,000. They're saying she stole. He held up the papers. She didn't steal a thing. Someone set her up, and we are going to prove it. Kane raised his hand. He had been Blake's sergeant-at-arms for 6 years and had the particular quality of stillness that comes not from calm, but from absolute readiness. What do you need? Merritt stepped forward. We need witnesses, anyone Dorothy helped over the years, neighbors, parents, former teachers, anyone who will go on record. He looked at Cassidy. Cassidy pulled out his phone. I'm documenting the school, Cassidy said. Every repair listed in the district records as completed. I want visual proof of what was actually done and what was not. Blake pointed at Kane. Research, everything on Doyle Hargrove, where he worked before, any complaints, any pattern. He paused. We have one shot at this. Evie can't afford a lawyer. We're building this case ourselves. That means nights, weekends, whatever it takes. He looked around the yard. Anyone got a problem with that? Silence. Then a man in the front row stood. He was in his 40s, heavy set with a beard going gray, in the hands of someone who had worked construction for a long time. His name was Dex. When I was in 6th grade, I couldn't read, he said. Not at all. I had made it that far by memorizing things and guessing and sitting in the back, hoping nobody called on me. He paused. Mrs. Reeves found out. She kept me after school, used picture books from her own house. 2 months. Every afternoon. He looked at Blake. I'm in. Another man stood. She fixed my mother's porch railing the winter before last. Showed up on a Saturday morning with tools and did it for free. Didn't say a word about it to anyone. I'm in. One by one they stood, all 22 of them. Dorothy went inside and made a second pot of coffee. She brought it out in the big thermos she used for long shifts, set it on the nearest table without a word. Kane looked up and gave her a small nod. She went back inside. She sat at the kitchen table with the pill bottle and looked down the hallway at Daniel's photograph on the dresser. I don't know what comes next, she told him, in the way she had been telling him things for 40 years, requiring no words, receiving no answer, still a conversation. But I'm still here. She put the bottle back in the drawer. Then after a moment, she took it out again, set it on the counter, left it there in plain sight where it had never been before. Nobody would notice, but she noticed, and it felt like the right thing to do. The notebooks were the foundation of everything. Blake worked through them systematically, starting with the oldest and moving forward cross-referencing each entry against the purchase orders from the lawsuit. Each notebook was written in Dorothy's block handwriting, neat and economical. No flourishes, no wasted space. Every entry dated every item listed with its quantity and requisition number. October 14th, replace fluorescent ballast in room 12, 2 units. Requisition 4471, 34 years of this, every day. Blake laid the first discrepancy on the table at 9:15, and the men nearest to him stopped what they were doing. The notebook entry from a specific October 18 years into Dorothy's tenure floor wax ordered 12 gallons. The district purchase order from the same date floor wax ordered 30 gallons. He pulled another, a November from the same period. Notebook fluorescent ballast replaced 4 units, 4 classrooms. Purchase order, fluorescent ballast, 18 units. He laid them side by side. Someone changed the numbers. Merritt had been standing nearby scanning the later notebooks. He set one down and looked at Blake's comparison. 20 years of entries match, he said. The numbers in her notebooks and the district records are within a few dollars of each other for 2 decades. Then Hargrove arrives and suddenly everything costs 2-3 times what it should. Blake nodded slowly. He did not steal $47,000. He used her name, used her established record, inflated everything she had put her name to, and put the difference somewhere else. That was when Merritt found the 11. They were filed in the middle of a stack of documents, not at the beginning or end, where anomalies were more likely to catch the eye. 11 purchase orders, each bearing Dorothy's name and what appeared to be her signature, each dated after her retirement. He checked the retirement date on the letter Dorothy had received when she left, cross-referenced it against the purchase order dates. He set the papers down. Blake, he said, come look at this. Blake came over, read the dates, read the retirement confirmation, looked at the signatures. The silence between them had a particular texture, the kind that forms when 2 people are looking at something that clarifies everything at once. She retired 2 years ago, Merritt said. Blake picked up one of the post-retirement purchase orders. Someone has been submitting orders under her name for 2 years, after she left. He looked at Merritt. Hargrove was not just inflating her orders while she worked here. He was forging her signature after she was gone. And then he turned around and accused her of it. He set the paper down with a deliberate care that meant the opposite of calm. We need Kane. Kane had been at the laptop since 7. He worked without announcing his progress, moving between databases and public records with the efficiency of someone who had done this kind of research before. Blake laid the 11 post-retirement purchase orders in front of him. Kane looked at the dates, looked at the signature lines, said nothing for a moment, then turned back to his laptop and started typing. Dorothy was in the kitchen. Merritt found her there, sitting with her coffee gone cold and her hands around the mug anyway, the way she held things when she was thinking. He sat down across from her. She had always been able to read him, even as a 5-year-old who didn't talk for the first week. She said, "What did you find?" He told her about the 11 purchase orders. She was quiet for a long time. Then he filed them after I left. Yes, under my name. Yes. She sat with that. She did not look surprised. She looked like someone who has suspected the shape of something in the dark for a long time and has just had it confirmed. He framed me for his own crime, she said. It was not a question. Merritt nodded. She took a slow breath. Then show me. Kane found the company at 10:47. He called Blake over with a single word. Blake came. Merritt followed. The 3 of them stood at the laptop while Kane walked through what he had found. Every inflated purchase order, every post-retirement submission under Dorothy's name, all of it flowing to a single vendor, a company called Hargrove Supply, LLC, registered in Nebraska, incorporated 15 months ago, 3 months after Doyle Hargrove took the superintendent position. Kane pulled up the business registration. Registered agent Randall Hargrove. He clicked to the next tab. A property record. Randall Hargrove residential address in Millbrook, 4 miles from the district offices. Blake said, "Who is Randall Hargrove?" Kane clicked again. A newspaper announcement. Doyle Hargrove photographed at a Chamber of Commerce event alongside his brother, Randall Hargrove, owner of Hargrove Supply, LLC. The yard went quiet. Not the productive quiet of people working. The absolute quiet of people who have just understood something completely. Blake looked at the screen. He set her up for his own fraud, Kane said. Inflated orders routed the money through his brother's company kept the difference. Then when Dorothy noticed and reported it, he filed a civil complaint against her before anyone could look at where the money was actually going. How much, Merritt asked. Kane pulled up the spreadsheet he had been building for 2 hours. Every purchase order in the district records for the 18 months of Hargrove's tenure cross-referenced against market rates. He turned the laptop to face them. $340,000. Blake looked at the number for a long time. He's been charging 4 times market rate on basic supplies, Kane said. A case of floor wax that should cost $40, Hargrove Supply billed $120. Light fixtures that retail for $15 billed at $52. Multiply that across every order for 18 months. $340,000 moved from the school district to his brother's company. Merritt said it quietly, and he blamed Dorothy for $47,000 of it. Enough to discredit her, Blake said. Enough to make her look like the thief so nobody listened when she said the numbers were wrong. He looked at the stack of purchase orders, then at the notebooks. He did this before Blake said. This is not the first time. That was when Cassidy came back. He had been gone since early morning. He came through the front gate with his camera bag over one shoulder and a folder of printed photographs under his arm. He set everything on the nearest table and stood back. He did not say anything. He let them look. The photographs were organized by location, each one labeled with a corresponding maintenance record from the district's public files. The gymnasium floor, a crack running the full length of the hardwood wide enough to catch a basketball. The maintenance log, gymnasium floor repaired and resurfaced, 2020 $38,000, allocated marked paid to Hargrove Supply, LLC. The photograph showed the crack unrepaired exactly as it had always been. The third floor heating system, portable space heaters plugged into wall sockets in half the classrooms. The maintenance log, HVAC system replaced and updated October 2022, $45,000 marked paid. The photograph showed the original boiler rust covering the joints, a red inspection tag from 2019. The second floor bathroom, a sink with a crack running from basin to base, a work order still open after 6 months. The maintenance log bathroom fixtures replaced 2022 $22,000 marked paid. The main hallway, paint peeling in long strips, water stains spreading from the ceiling seams. The maintenance log hallway repainted and sealed 2021 $15,000 marked paid. Cassidy looked at the room. None of this work was ever done. Every repair in the maintenance log for the past 2 years is documented as completed. Not one of them happened. He paused. Before he came here, he stood in the gymnasium for a while. Stood in the same corner where the cardboard box had been found 26 years ago. He had not planned to stop there. His feet just knew the distance. He stood in that spot and understood in a way that did not require words that everything the job, the key on his belt, his presence in this building on this night, traced back to a woman who had walked into a dark gymnasium before sunrise 3 decades ago and chosen not to walk away from what she found. Every dollar that was supposed to go into this building, he said, went to the superintendent's brother's company. And when my mother noticed and reported it, he accused her of his own crime. Blake looked at the total Kane had calculated, $340,000. Not $1 of it had touched the building it was supposed to maintain. He looked at his brothers, at Kane, at the men standing around the tables. We have the notebooks, he said. We have the inflated purchase orders. We have the post-retirement forgeries. We have the company registration. We have the family connection. We have the photographs of every repair that was paid for and never done. And we have 34 years of Dorothy's records showing that every cent she spent went exactly where she said it went. He paused. This is not a civil complaint, he said. This is a man who got caught stealing from children and tried to make a janitor take the fall for it. Merritt had gone inside while Blake was talking. He came back 20 minutes later with Dorothy. She stood at the edge of the yard and looked at the tables, at the photographs, at the spreadsheets, at the 34 notebooks stacked in chronological order. She looked at it the way she looked at a repair that had taken longer than expected, but had finally been done right. He did this before, Blake said to her, not just here. She looked at him. Kane laid out what the afternoon's research had uncovered. A newspaper article from 8 years prior. A Colorado school district. A superintendent had resigned under pressure amid a financial inquiry that identified inflated vendor contracts routed through a company connected to the superintendent's family. The superintendent resigned before formal charges were filed. Doyle Hargrove. 4 years later, Iowa. A school board investigation into missing maintenance funds. A vendor relationship that couldn't be explained. A superintendent who submitted his resignation before the investigation concluded. Doyle Hargrove. He came here because nobody checked, Blake said. Because he resigned before the charges stuck in either place. Because there was no formal conviction. Just a pattern that nobody thought to look for. Dorothy read the articles carefully the way she read everything. He chooses small towns, she said finally. Districts that don't have the resources to audit thoroughly. And he finds someone already in the building with a long record of orders and requisitions, someone who will look guilty if you don't look closely enough. She paused. Someone who won't have a lawyer. Nobody answered that. There was nothing to answer. It was simply true. Merritt found her in the kitchen at 6 in the evening. She was washing dishes, hands moving on autopilot, the particular rhythm of someone who does physical work when they need to think. He closed the door behind him, stood at the counter beside her. She said, "I'm fine." He said, "You're not." He saw the pill bottle on the counter. He picked it up, read the label, read the prescription date, looked at the name of the medication. He had worked emergency response on construction sites for 4 years. He knew what to look for. He had been watching her since he arrived that morning, the way she gripped the counter when she came in from the yard, the careful management of her breathing when she thought no one was paying attention. "How long?" he said. She kept washing. 3 months. "How many episodes?" She did not answer. His voice stayed even, the same voice she had used with him with all 3 of them 10,000 times. Not because it came easily, but because she had understood that some questions needed to be asked in a tone that made them safe to answer. "How many episodes?" he said again. 4, she said. "Maybe 5. He closed his eyes for a moment. "When was the first one?" "The day the letter came." He opened his eyes. He looked at her the way she had looked at each of them. The specific look that says, "I see what you're carrying, and you do not have to carry it alone. You have been having chest pains since the lawsuit started," he said. "And you didn't tell us. You boys had enough going on." "That is not how this works, Ma. We didn't have anything to go through growing up because you made sure of it. You gave us stable ground every single day." He paused. "You do not get to take yourself off the list. You taught us better than that." She turned off the tap. "Fine," she said. He called the doctor. Dorothy sat at the kitchen table while he was on the phone, both hands around her mug, looking out the window at the yard where the tables were still set up, and the last of the day's light was falling long and quiet across the equipment. Dr. Paulson's office fit her in the next morning. Merritt drove her, sat in the chair beside the exam table the same way she had sat beside each of them in doctors' offices and hospital waiting rooms and school counselors' chairs for 24 years. The doctor confirmed it. Mild coronary artery disease, manageable with medication and lifestyle adjustment. The primary risk factor right now was stress. The primary risk factor right now was the lawsuit. Merritt looked at the doctor. "Adjust the medication. She's going to the courthouse in 2 days." The doctor wrote the prescription, handed it to Merritt. "Make sure she takes it." On the way home, Merritt stopped at the pharmacy, came back to the car with the medication and a weekly pill organizer, the kind with a compartment for each day clearly labeled. Dorothy looked at it. "You bought that before we even went in." "Last week," he said. "I had a feeling." He pulled out of the parking lot. They rode in silence for a minute. "Our whole lives started because you worried about us," he said. "You made sure we ate, slept, stayed healthy." He looked at the road. "You don't get to tell us not to do the same for you. That is not how you raised us." She put her hand on his arm. "When did you get so smart?" she said. "I had a good teacher." That night, the 3 of them sat at the kitchen table after the Iron Ridge MC had packed up their equipment and gone home. Blake, Merritt, Cassidy. The same 3 chairs, the same kitchen. Dorothy made dinner, and for a while nobody talked about the trial. They talked about other things. A bike Cassidy was restoring. A job Merritt had finished last week. Small things, ordinary things. Then Blake set his fork down. "I need you to know something," he said. "Whatever happens in that courtroom, whatever comes next," he looked at her. "You gave us everything. Not money, not things. You gave us the understanding that showing up is enough, that being present and honest and consistent is enough. Dorothy looked at her plate. He continued, we are going to walk into that courtroom the same way you walked into that gymnasium 34 years ago, because you showed us how. Dorothy was quiet for a moment. I need to tell you something I have never said, she said. They looked at her. When Daniel died, I wanted to go with him. Her voice was even, measured, the only way she knew how to say hard things. Every morning for a long time I woke up, and the weight of it was so heavy I could barely stand. No one spoke. Then I found you in that box, Blake, and I had a reason to wake up. Someone needed me, someone small and helpless and crying. And I thought maybe I can do this one thing. Maybe I can show up for him. She looked at Merritt. And when your mother died and you taught me how to make eggs the way she did, I learned that grief does not mean the end of everything, that love can still taste like something even after. She looked at Cassidy. And when you asked if you could stay forever, I realized I was already home. That home is not a place. It's the people who need you and who you need right back. She stopped. You three didn't just get saved. You saved me. Every single day. Cassidy stood without a word, walked around the table and wrapped his arms around her from behind, the way he had done at 8 years old when he had no language for what he felt and used his body instead. Blake reached across the table and took her hand. Merritt sat with the stillness of a man who is feeling more than he is showing and knows she can see it anyway. They stayed like that for a while. The garage light was still on at 3 in the morning. Blake had gone out there at midnight, the way he went to the garage whenever sleep became impossible, and his hands needed something to do. The rag moved in slow circles across the chrome of his Harley. The garage smelled like oil and metal, and the cold of a November night bleeding through the doorframe gaps. Merritt found him there at 2, did not say anything, pulled a rag from the shelf and started on his own bike, working from the opposite end. 2 sets of hands doing the same careful work. The sound of it filled the space between them. Cassidy arrived at 3. He sat on the workbench with his sketchbook open and his pencil moving, not speaking, not needing to. This was how they had always been together, in the hard hours, the presence of each other, its own kind of answer to whatever question the dark was asking. At 5, Blake stopped polishing. What if we lose, he said. The question sat in the garage air. Merritt set his rag down. Then we appeal, he said. We keep going. We go to the state. We go to the press. We find every avenue that exists and we take all of them. We do not stop until every piece of what we found is in front of someone who can act on it. Blake nodded slowly. He was not asking because he doubted the evidence. He was asking because he had learned long ago that the difference between a good leader and a great one was the willingness to look at the worst outcome and decide what you would do about it before it arrived. Cassidy turned the sketchbook around. He had drawn Dorothy. She was standing in front of Millbrook Elementary with a mop in her hand and the Carhartt jacket on her shoulders, the posture of someone who has decided that showing up is not a sacrifice, but a practice. Behind her, Blake Merritt Cassidy, full-grown, standing close. Beneath the drawing in Cassidy's careful block letters, she showed up. Blake looked at it for a long moment. So will we, he said. The sun was coming up when they went back inside. Dorothy was already in the kitchen. Dressed, navy blue dress, the one she'd found at a thrift store years ago that hung slightly loose across the shoulders. Her work boots polished. The Carhartt jacket folded over the back of the chair. Coffee was made, 3 mugs waiting on the counter. The pill organizer sat beside the kettle, open to today's compartment. She took the morning dose without being asked, without ceremony. Put the organizer in her jacket pocket. Cassidy picked the jacket up from the chair and held it for her. She put it on. At 6:30, the Iron Ridge MC gathered outside on Birch Street. 25 Harleys and formation engines not yet running, men standing beside their machines with the patience of people who understand that some moments require stillness before they require motion. Blake led Dorothy down the porch steps. The gas tank was there. He had carried it out before anyone else was awake. It was old dented paint worn away in long strips. Dorothy recognized it immediately. Her hands had touched it thousands of times. It was from the motorcycle she had sold 20 years ago to pay for Merritt's emergency room bill, the broken arm, the insurance that did not cover the full cost. She had sold the only thing she owned that was worth anything and had never replaced it. Blake had found it in a salvage yard 3 states away, had it restored, had driven there himself to pick it up. Across the tank in paint that was deliberate against the worn metal were signatures, 25 of them. Every member of Iron Ridge MC, their names and call signs written in a hand that did not try to be neat, but tried to be permanent. Dorothy looked at the signatures for a long time. She reached out and touched the metal with 2 fingers, felt the cold surface, the painted names, the weight of what they meant. 25 brothers, Blake said. One family. We ride with you, all the way to the end. She looked up at him. She did not have words. She had never been a person who reached for words when something was too large for them. Instead, she put her hand flat against the tank for a moment, feeling the metal and the names beneath her palm. Then she straightened her jacket. Let's go, she said. Blake brought his Harley to the curb, handed her a helmet. She looked at it, turned it over in her hands. When's the last time you rode? 20 years. Time to remember. She put on the helmet, swung onto the bike behind him, wrapped her arms around his waist, and felt the engine vibrate to life beneath them, with a low, steady power that traveled up through the frame. 24 other engines started in sequence, one after another, until Birch Street was filled with the sound of them. Blake looked back over his shoulder. She nodded. They pulled out in formation, Blake at the front, Merritt and Cassidy flanking, 22 brothers behind. The sun was fully up, cutting through the November morning with the clarity that cold air gives to light, making everything sharp and exact. They rode through Millbrook, past the diner where Lorraine had worked double shifts 6 days a week, past the school, its front entrance visible from the road, past the church where Hargrove had donated every Sunday, building a reputation on money that was not his. At every intersection, people stopped to watch. By the time they reached the courthouse, the street was lined. Dorothy saw them before Blake slowed the bike. They were standing on both sides of the courthouse steps, 2 and 3 deep in places. Patrice from Birch Street, Gerald, who had driven 2 hours, the nurse who had learned to read in the custodial closet, the cook from the diner, the retired principal's wife with her manila envelope. Former students who were now adults with jobs and children and lives that had been quietly shaped by the woman who mopped their school's floors. 200 people. They did not cheer when the bikes pulled up. They did not make noise. They stood in the cold morning air and watched Dorothy climb off the motorcycle, and they stood up straighter, the way people stand when they are witnessing something they want to be present for, something they will remember. Blake dismounted, Merritt on her left side, Cassidy on her right, 22 men forming a quiet protective line behind them. Dorothy looked at the courthouse steps, at the doors at the top, at the 200 people on both sides of the path between here and there. She lifted her chin. She walked. The hallway inside was already full. She stopped in the entrance and took it in. People lined both walls, faces she knew. The woman whose kitchen faucet she had fixed one Saturday morning because it had come up at church. The father of a boy who had done his homework on a bucket in her custodial closet for 3 years. A man whose face she recognized, but whose name she could not place from some conversation in the school parking lot years ago that had mattered to him more than she had known. They turned when she walked in. One by one, without any signal or coordination, they stood. Dorothy's throat closed. Blake put his hand on her shoulder. An older woman stepped forward. Gray hair, hands rough from a lifetime of work, eyes kind in the specific way of someone who has not had an easy time of it and has chosen kindness anyway. She touched Dorothy's arm gently. "We're with you," she said. Dorothy walked through the hallway. Blake on her left, Merritt on her right, Cassidy just behind. The weight of 200 people choosing to be in this building on this morning. The courtroom was smaller than she expected. Wood paneling, fluorescent lights, rows of public benches filling with people who had secured seats. She walked to the defense table, set down Blake's folders, set her hand briefly on the box at her feet containing 34 spiral notebooks. Across the aisle, Beckett Sloan. Tall, silver-haired, expensive suit, the confidence of a man who had won most of the cases he had walked into. Beside him, Doyle Hargrove. Pressed shirt, hands folded, posture perfect, looking straight ahead at the bench at the bailiff's station, anywhere except at Dorothy. He had not looked at her since she walked in. She noticed this. Judge Colette Wynn came in from the side door. Early 60s, gray hair, pulled back, reading glasses on a chain. The quality that good judges develop after long years on the bench, the appearance of having already considered every possible version of events and settled into a position of pure attention, waiting to be shown which version was true. This is a civil complaint filed by the Millbrook Unified School District against Dorothy Reeves alleging misappropriation of district resources. She looked at both tables. Are both parties ready? Ready, Your Honor, Sloan said smoothly. Dorothy stood. I'm ready, Your Honor. Judge Wynn studied her over her glasses. Mrs. Reeves, I see you're representing yourself. Yes, ma'am. Do you understand the complexities of a civil defense proceeding? I understand I can't afford a lawyer, Dorothy said. And I understand I didn't do what they're accusing me of. The judge looked at her for a moment. Very well. Mr. Sloan, you may proceed. Sloan stood and buttoned his jacket. Your Honor, this case is straightforward. The evidence will show that over a period of 34 years, the defendant systematically misappropriated school district resources for personal use. He gestured to his document stack. Purchase orders, requisition forms, supply logs, all bearing Mrs. Reeves's signature, all documenting materials that were ordered and never fully accounted for. He picked up a paper. October of the defendant's 18th year of employment, 30 gallons of floor wax ordered. The school used 12 gallons that year. Where did the other 18 go? He walked along the front of the room. This is not a single lapse in judgment. This is a pattern, systematic misuse of public resources by a trusted employee who believed no one was paying attention. He turned to face Dorothy. $47,000 over 3 decades, small amounts at first, then larger, until someone finally noticed. He sat down. Judge Wynn made a note. Mrs. Reeves, do you wish to make an opening statement? Dorothy stood. Her hands were on the edge of the table. She gripped it once briefly, then let go. Your Honor, I worked at Millbrook Elementary for 34 years. Mopped floors, fixed pipes, changed light bulbs. I made $12 an hour and I was proud to do it. Her voice was quiet and present and entirely steady. I didn't steal anything. Every supply I ordered went into that building. Every repair I made, I wrote down. I kept notebooks, 34 years of them. She gestured to the box at her feet. They're all here, and they will show you the truth. She sat down. Judge Wynn nodded. Mr. Sloan, call your first witness. The district accountant took the stand, nervous visible in the way he held his hands. Sloan established the purchase orders, the dollar amounts, the discrepancies between supplies ordered and supplies apparently received. Judge Wynn looked at Dorothy. Mrs. Reeves, do you wish to cross-examine? Dorothy stood, walked to the witness stand. She had never done this before. She had the notebooks and the truth, and she decided that was enough. You testified that standard procedure requires administrative approval for supply orders. That is correct. I have that approval. She pulled a letter from her folder and handed it to the accountant. This is a letter from Principal Howard, written 26 years ago. It authorizes me to use school facilities and resources for purposes related to my work with students in my care during non-school hours. Is that administrative approval? The accountant read it. His expression shifted. Yes, this would constitute administrative approval. So the statement that I acted without authorization is not accurate based on this document? No, it is not. Dorothy took the letter back and handed it to the judge. No further questions. She sat down. Blake gave her a single nod. Your Honor, Dorothy said, I would like to call my first witness, Blake Reeves. Blake walked to the stand. The bailiff swore him in. Sloan's expression did not change, but something behind his eyes recalibrated. Dorothy stood. What is your relationship to me? You're my mother. How did I become your mother? Blake looked at the judge. 26 years ago, she found me in a cardboard box on the gymnasium floor at Millbrook Elementary. I was 3 days old. Someone left me there with a note that said, please take care of him. She took me home, fed me, sat up with me every night. Then she petitioned the court for custody and raised me on a janitor's salary. The room was very still. Dorothy picked up a notebook. She handed it to Blake. What are these? Your work records. Every repair you made, every supply you ordered. 34 years of daily entries. Have you reviewed them? All of them. What did you find? Blake set the notebook beside a purchase order from the lawsuit. He did it carefully, giving everyone time to see. Your notebook from the month they're claiming you ordered 30 gallons of floor wax. He pointed to the entry. You wrote 12 gallons. The district's purchase order says 30. He set it down and picked up another pair. Your notebook from the November they're claiming 18 fluorescent ballasts. You wrote 4 units, 4 classrooms. Purchase order says 18. He looked at Sloan. Someone changed the numbers. Sloan stood. Objection, speculation. Judge Wynn leaned forward slightly. On what basis are you making this claim, Mr. Reeves? Because for 20 years, the entries in my mother's notebooks in the district records match within a few dollars of each other. Blake pulled out the spreadsheet Kane had compiled. Then Doyle Hargrove takes over as superintendent. He pointed at the columns. The discrepancy jumps to 300% in some cases. The pattern begins exactly when he arrives and does not exist before. Judge Wynn studied the spreadsheet. Continue, there is more, Your Honor. Blake placed 5 purchase orders on the judge's bench. These orders are dated after my mother retired 2 years ago. They carry her name and what appears to be her signature. But she has not worked at that school since she left. He looked at the judge directly. How does a retired janitor sign purchase orders for a building she no longer has access to? The courtroom reacted. Judge Wynn's gavel came down once efficiently. Order. She looked at Sloan. Mr. Sloan, do you have an explanation for the dates on these documents? Sloan arranged his papers. Your Honor, we will need to verify the specific filing dates. The dates are on your own documents, Dorothy said from her seat. Judge Wynn made a note. Mrs. Reeves, call your next witness, Merritt Reeves. Merritt took the stand. He wore his welding jacket over a collared shirt. His hands resting on the arms of the witness chair had the weathered quality of hands that had worked at close range with fire and metal for years. Dorothy faced him. What is your work, structural welding and emergency medical response on construction sites? Have you examined the signatures on the purchase orders in question? I have. What did you find? Merritt pulled out the magnified images. 2 signatures side by side projected large enough for the room to see. This is my mother's signature from a requisition she filed in 1995. This is a signature on a purchase order from 2 years ago submitted after her retirement. He pointed to specific elements. My mother has arthritis in her right hand, developed over the last 15 years. You can see it in the angle of certain letters, a very slight irregularity in the downstroke of the capital R. The post-retirement signature does not have this. The pressure pattern is different. The angle is different. Sloan stood. Your Honor, Mr. Reeves is not a certified handwriting analyst. No, Merritt said, but I read hand movements every day. Welding at close tolerance requires reading the pressure angle and force of the tool in real time. I have been reading my mother's handwriting for 24 years. He looked at the signatures. This is not her signature. Someone copied the shape of it and missed what the years had done to her hand. Judge Wynn examined the images. I'll allow it with the notation that Mr. Reeves is not a certified expert. Dorothy looked at Merritt for a moment. Can you describe my current health condition? Merritt paused for just a beat. You have mild coronary artery disease. Chest pain associated with stress. The condition has been worsening since you received this lawsuit. He paused. You were hiding the medication because you didn't want us to worry. I found it 3 days ago. He kept his voice level. He looked at Sloan at Hargrove, who was still looking at the table in front of him. This lawsuit is causing direct physical harm to a 70-year-old woman who did not steal anything, he said. That is not a legal argument. I want it said in this room, Dorothy said quietly. No further questions. She looked at her last folder. Your Honor, I call Cassidy Reeves. Cassidy walked to the stand. The youngest and the quietest in the room paid attention to him, the way rooms pay attention to people who speak rarely, because when they do, it tends to mean something. Dorothy handed him the laptop. What is your work, tattooing and part-time custodial work at Millbrook Elementary? You have access to the building. I have a key to every room. Have you documented the current condition of the school? I have. Cassidy opened the laptop. Images appeared on the screen at the front of the room. This is the gymnasium floor. The crack runs the full length of the hardwood, wide enough to be a tripping hazard. He set the maintenance log entry beside it. District records show this floor was repaired and resurfaced in 2020. $38,000 allocated and marked paid to Hargrove Supply, LLC. The photograph showed the crack untouched. This is the main boiler. The red inspection tag has been there since 2019. The district records show the heating system was replaced in October 2022. $45,000 marked paid to Hargrove Supply, LLC. Half the classrooms are using portable space heaters because the building has no functioning central heat. Second floor girls' bathroom. The sink has a structural crack. A work order has been open for 6 months. District records show bathroom fixtures were replaced in 2022. $22,000 marked paid. Main hallway. Water damage visible in multiple ceiling sections. Paint peeling from the walls. The maintenance log shows this hallway was repainted and sealed in 2021. $15,000 marked paid. He looked at the room. None of this work was done. Every repair listed in the district maintenance records for the past 2 years is documented as completed. Not one of them happened. The building is in the same condition it was before the work orders were filed. He opened the final tab. Every inflated purchase order was fulfilled by Hargrove Supply, LLC. He clicked to the registration record. Filed 15 months ago, 3 months after Doyle Hargrove took the superintendent position. Registered agent Randall Hargrove. He clicked again. Public property records show Randall Hargrove is a Millbrook resident. He clicked to the newspaper announcement. Doyle Hargrove photographed at a Chamber of Commerce event alongside his brother Randall Hargrove, owner of Hargrove Supply LLC. He closed the laptop. Every dollar that was supposed to go into that building went to the superintendent's brother's company. And when my mother noticed the numbers and reported it to the principal, the superintendent filed a lawsuit accusing her of the fraud he was committing. Judge Wynn's gavel came down. Order. She was quiet for a moment. Then she looked at Sloan. Mr. Sloan, are you aware of this corporate connection? Sloan's composure, which had held throughout the morning with professional reliability, showed its first fault line. Your Honor, the district was not informed of this relationship. Then the district has a significant problem, Judge Wynn said. She made a long note. She looked at Cassidy. Do you have documentation in hard copy? Yes, ma'am. He handed her the folder. She read through every page. The room waited. This court will take a 15-minute recess. When we return, I expect full cooperation from both parties. She stood. Everyone stood. During the recess, Dorothy sat at the table with her hands folded and her eyes on the middle distance. Blake sat beside her. Merritt stood behind her. Cassidy did not move from his chair. She was thinking about Daniel, about the photograph on the dresser at home, about 40 years of mornings when she had touched the edge of that photograph and chosen to go about her day. She was thinking about the gymnasium floor in those photographs, the crack that had been there since before Hargrove arrived, running the full length of the hardwood, the floor where a cardboard box had sat before sunrise 26 years ago. I hope you can see what they became, she said quietly to no one in the room. Court resumed. Dorothy's witnesses came to the stand one by one. Patrice from Birch Street. I have known Dorothy Reeves for 30 years. She fixed my fence twice, my porch railing once, my flooded basement on a Saturday morning because I mentioned it at church and she showed up the next day with a pump. She never charged me. She never asked for anything. She is the most honest person I have ever known. Gerald, the retired teacher who had driven 2 hours. Dorothy built the stage for our Christmas play every year. Her own time, her own money for materials the budget would not cover. She did it because she said the children deserved something real. She never asked for recognition. The nurse. When I was 8 years old, I could not read, not at all. Mrs. Reeves found out, and she kept me after school every afternoon for 2 months. Picture books from her own house. I am a registered nurse because of what happened in that custodial closet. The cook from the diner where Lorraine had worked, she brought those 3 boys in every Sunday for years. 3 kids' plates and a coffee for herself. Never food for herself. I started adding extra food to the boys' plates. She noticed. Never said a word about it. Just smiled. The retired principal's wife who handed over the manila envelope. My husband wrote this letter 26 years ago, authorizing Dorothy to use school resources because she had taken in a baby she found abandoned in that building, and she was raising him on what the school paid her. He said it was the right thing to do. She held up the envelope. It has been in our files since then. 12 witnesses in total, all of them saying the same thing in their different voices. She was there, every day, for 34 years, and she never asked for anything in return. Judge Wynn looked at Dorothy when the last witness stepped down. Mrs. Reeves, do you wish to make a final statement? Dorothy stood. She walked to the front of the room. She held nothing. No papers, no notebooks. She gripped the low wooden railing with both hands and faced the judge. Your Honor, I'm just a janitor. She said it clearly without apology. I mopped floors for 34 years, $12 an hour. I fixed pipes and changed light bulbs and patched a roof once with materials I bought myself because the work order sat on someone's desk for 3 months and the rain wasn't going to wait. Her voice was steady. I found Blake in a cardboard box on that gymnasium floor. Merritt's mother died and nobody came for him. Cassidy was hiding in my basement with bruises on his arms. She paused. You don't need money to raise children. You need to show up. Be there when they wake up and when they go to sleep and when they need help and when they're scared and when they don't have words for what they're feeling. She looked at the judge. I showed up every single day. The pain arrived without warning. A tightening high in the center of her chest, the specific pressure she had learned over 3 months to recognize. She gripped the railing harder. Her vision narrowed slightly at the edges. She did not stop. I gave everything I had to those boys and to that school, she said. Her voice remained present, remained hers. Not one bolt, not 1 gallon of floor wax, not one light bulb. I did not steal anything, not ever. In 34 years, not once. She let go of the railing, took one step. Her knees gave way. The courtroom erupted. Merritt cleared the barrier before the bailiff had finished processing what was happening. He caught her before she reached the floor, one arm around her waist, his other hand moving immediately to her wrist with the trained reflex of someone who has managed emergencies for years. She's breathing, he said to Blake. Pulse is rapid. His voice was controlled in the specific way of someone who has practiced being controlled in crises because panic is a luxury that costs lives. He looked up. Call it in. Blake already had his phone out. Ambulance to Millbrook County Courthouse. Cardiac event. Female 70 years old. Judge Wynn was on her feet. Clear the area. Nobody left. 200 people stayed exactly where they were. The Iron Ridge brothers formed a circle without being asked, letting Merritt work. Cassidy knelt on Dorothy's other side. He did not have medical training. He held her hand. Merritt tilted her head back, checked her airway, maintained her position. His voice dropped. Come on, Ma, stay with me. Her eyes opened. Merritt was the first thing she saw. He said, don't talk, the ambulance is coming. She looked past him at the room, at the 200 people who had stayed, at Sloane's papers spread across the plaintiff's table, at Doyle Hargrove, who was still looking at the table in front of him. Then something changed. Whether it was the sound of the ambulance sirens beginning in the distance, or the weight of what had just been said in open court, or the cumulative collapse of a constructed persona that had been held in place for too long, something in Hargrove broke. He stood up abruptly. His chair scraped back against the floor. He opened his mouth, and what came out was not a sentence, not an argument, not even a word. It was the sound of a man who has suddenly run out of the thing that was holding him together. Sloane put a hand on his arm and said something quietly. Hargrove looked at his attorney. Then he looked at the room, at the 200 people, at the 25 bikers, at Dorothy on the floor, with her sons around her, at the photographs on the screen, at the notebooks in the box, at 34 years of block handwriting that had undone everything he had built. He sat back down. He put his face in his hands. The controlled pressed shirt, smooth-talking man who had walked into Millbrook 18 months ago and decided that a janitor would be easy to destroy, that man was gone. What remained was something smaller, and the whole courtroom could see the difference. Judge Wynn looked at both tables with an expression that had moved beyond professional neutrality into something colder and more deliberate. We are adjourning until tomorrow morning, she said. She looked at the paramedics rushing in through the side door. Take care of her. She brought her gavel down once. This court is in recess. St. Mary's Hospital was 12 minutes from the courthouse. The Harleys arrived 7 minutes after the ambulance. 25 of them in the parking lot when Blake Merritt and Cassidy came in through the emergency entrance. The waiting area. 3 hours. The brothers filled the hallway outside. The doctor came out. She looked at the 3 men who stood simultaneously. Family of Dorothy Reeves. We're her sons. She's stable. The episode was mild. We're keeping her overnight for observation. She paused. She asked about the trial before the sedative took effect. Merritt's shoulders dropped slightly, the way a man's shoulders drop when he has been holding them up for hours without realizing it. Can we see her one at a time? Blake went first. Dorothy was awake, propped on pillows, an IV in her arm, the heart monitor making its steady report. She looked small in the hospital bed, but her eyes were clear. Hey, Evie. Hey, Blake. He sat in the chair beside her. You scared us. I know. I'm sorry. Don't be. You said what needed to be said. She looked at the ceiling, then at him. Did we do enough? He leaned forward with his forearms on his knees. You gave them 34 years of notebooks. You gave them 52 witnesses. You gave them the photographs and the company registration and the pattern from Colorado and Iowa. He paused. And then you stood in that room with your knuckles going white on that railing, and you told the truth until your body wouldn't let you continue. He looked at her. Yeah, Evie, we did enough. She closed her eyes. The next morning, the courtroom was full again. At the defense table, a video screen had been set up connected to a tablet at St. Mary's. Dorothy's face appeared from her hospital bed gown. IV still in her arm, heart monitor visible in the background, eyes direct and steady. Judge Wynn entered. Everyone stood. She settled at the bench, opened her file, looked at the video screen. Mrs. Reeves, how are you feeling? Better, Your Honor. Ready to hear your decision. Judge Wynn opened the file, read for a moment, then looked up. After reviewing all evidence presented in this proceeding, including testimony, documentary evidence, photographic documentation, and witness statements, I am dismissing this complaint with prejudice. The room erupted. Judge Wynn let it run for 2 seconds before the gavel came down. Furthermore, I am ordering an immediate independent audit of the Millbrook Unified School District maintenance accounts for the past 3 fiscal years. All purchase orders, vendor contracts, and payment records are to be preserved and made available to auditors within 14 days. She looked at the plaintiff's table directly. The evidence presented suggests a pattern of systematic financial fraud involving public education funds. I am referring this matter in its entirety to the county prosecutor's office for criminal investigation. Sloan stood. Your Honor, my client would like to sit down, Mr. Sloan. He sat down. Judge Wynn looked at the video screen. Mrs. Reeves, this court apologizes for what you have been made to endure. You are free to go. On the screen, Dorothy nodded once. Her face was composed. Her eyes were bright. In the corner of the frame, barely visible on the nightstand behind her, was the pill organizer. Open to today's compartment, already empty. Blake stood at the defense table. He looked at Judge Wynn. She's lucky to have you, the judge said, meaning the boys. No, ma'am, Blake said. We're lucky to have her. Doyle Hargrove was arrested 11 days later. The county prosecutor moved quickly once the audit confirmed what Kane's research had outlined. Randall Hargrove cooperated with investigators in exchange for reduced charges. The full accounting showed $342,000 moved from the district to Hargrove Supply LLC over 18 months. The forged signatures were confirmed by a certified analyst whose findings matched exactly what Merritt had presented. The Colorado and Iowa cases were reopened. The school board voted to fund a full renovation of Millbrook Elementary using the recovered funds. It took 8 months. The gymnasium floor was resurfaced. The boiler was replaced. The bathrooms were updated. The hallways were repainted. Every item in the maintenance backlog that had sat untouched for 2 years was completed by contractors who were paid fairly and did the work they were paid for. On a Saturday in April, when the dogwoods along the front entrance were in bloom again, the school held a dedication ceremony. Dorothy wore her navy blue dress and her work boots and the Carhartt jacket. She stood in the front row with Blake on her left and Merritt on her right, and Cassidy just behind his hand on her shoulder, the way it had been in courtrooms and hospital waiting rooms, and all the ordinary places where a hand on a shoulder is the whole of what needs to be said. The new superintendent gave a brief speech. The school board chairwoman said a few words. Then they unveiled it, a bronze plaque mounted on the gymnasium wall at the height where a child might reach up and touch it. Dorothy Reeves Gymnasium. She showed up. Afterward, the crowd moved outside. Dorothy stood for a while, receiving the handshakes and the embraces and the things people say when they are trying to say something larger than words allow. At some point in the late afternoon, she slipped away. She went inside, through the front entrance, down the hallway whose paint was new and smooth and unpeeling, up the stairs, past the second-floor bathroom where the sink was level and solid, into the gymnasium. The floor was bright and uncracked and finished to a shine she had not seen in years. The light came through the high windows at the angle of late afternoon, hitting the hardwood and making it look like something more than a floor. She walked to the center. She stood on the spot. She did not measure the distance or triangulate the location. She knew where it was. She had known for 26 years. The corner where the storage closet door stood slightly ajar. The place on the floor beneath the east window where a cardboard box had sat before sunrise on a winter morning. She stood there for a long time. She did the thing she did every morning. The private thing that required no audience and no words and was still always a conversation. She put her hand on her chest, felt the steady, imperfect, medicated beat of a heart that was still going. Daniel, she said the way she had been saying his name for 40 years. I hope you're proud. 3 sets of footsteps behind her. She did not turn around immediately. She let them come to her. That was how it had always worked from the very beginning. She put herself where they could find her. She waited. They came. Blake stood on her left, Merritt on her right, Cassidy just behind his hand finding her shoulder. She looked at the plaque on the wall. She looked at the floor beneath her feet. She looked at the window where the light was doing what it had always done, indifferent, reliable, and in its way beautiful. For 34 years, I thought this building needed me, she said. Blake waited. Turns out I needed it more. She paused. I needed what it gave me. What you gave me. All 3 of you. Nobody argued with that. It was simply true. She put her hand over Cassidy's where it rested on her shoulder. Felt Blake's hand come to rest on her arm. Felt Merritt's steady presence on her right side, the warmth of someone who had learned to be calm so that others could feel safe. They stood like that in the empty gymnasium, while the sounds of the reception drifted in from outside, and from further away the low rolling sound of motorcycle engines moving slowly through the streets. Iron Ridge MC, circling the neighborhood in a slow salute, their way of marking the things that mattered. Come on, Blake said eventually. They'll be looking for you. Dorothy took one last look at the plaque, read her name in bronze, thought about the morning she had stood in this exact spot and found a crying infant in a cardboard box, and said without knowing what it would mean, without knowing who she was talking to or what she was committing herself to. My name's Dot. I fix things. Let's get you fixed up. She straightened her jacket. Let's go home, she said. They walked out together, through the gymnasium door and down the hallway, and out through the front entrance where the dogwoods were blooming, and the evening was coming on clear and cold, and full of the particular kind of light that makes ordinary things look like they were always meant to be exactly as they are. Back to Birch Street, back to the kitchen with the 3 mismatched chairs and the 4th one Cassidy had brought in from the garage. Back to the table where the pill organizer sat on the counter, in plain sight, no longer hidden, because some things that are necessary deserve to be seen. Dorothy made coffee. They sat down. The Harleys could be heard in the distance, the last pass through the neighborhood before the brothers headed home, the sound of them fading down the street like the end of something and the beginning of something else at the same time. Merritt said, "You okay?" She considered the question honestly, the way she considered most things. "I'm good," she said. Cassidy put his hand on top of hers on the table, said nothing. He had never needed to. Blake looked at his brothers, at the woman at the head of the table who had found all 3 of them in their different kinds of darkness and had said each time in her different way the same essential thing. My name's Dot. I fix things. Let's get you fixed up. Dorothy looked at the 3 chairs that had always been there and the 4th one that was new, at the coffee going warm between her hands, at the 3 men who were her sons in every way that mattered, not by blood, but by choice, not by accident, but by 34 years of showing up every morning and deciding again that they were worth it. We turned out all right, she said. It was not a question. Yeah, Ma, Merritt said. We did. The engines faded down the street. The kitchen light hummed. The coffee stayed warm. And Dorothy Reeves sat at her table in the house on Birch Street and understood with the quiet certainty of someone who has lived long enough to see the full shape of a thing that this was what she had been building all along, not with money, not with anything the world would have called resources, but with the daily, unremarkable, faithful act of being present. She had shown up. They had shown up. That, in the end, was all of it. That was everything.